President Trump keeps his promise to get wokeness out of the United States Armed Forces as he signs multiple executive orders to reshape the military.
Senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy has all the details. Hey, Peter.
Good morning. And standing here, it feels like it's been more than a week and a day since President Trump was sworn in, because so far, and we've got a graphic here, he signed 38 executive orders, and he signed them in the Oval Office and at an arena and at his resort in Florida. The latest ones came last night, and what they do is reinstate troops who refused the COVID vaccine, about 8,000 people, develops an American Iron Dome missile defense system like what they have in Israel, formulate a new policy on transgender troops. That is up to Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, to figure out how that's going to work, and then ban DEI initiatives in the military.
I'll be signing 4 new executive orders. First is that I'm directing our new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, he's what we need, to immediately begin the construction of a state-of-the-art Iron Dome missile defense shield, which will be able to protect Americans. You see that with Israel, where out of 319 rockets, they knocked down just about every one of them. So I think the United States is entitled to that, and everything will be made right here in the USA, 100%.
And the Trump cabinet is growing. His Treasury Secretary was easily confirmed last night. Scott Bessent got 68 votes. Sean Duffy for transportation is expected to get bipartisan support as well later on today. Nothing public on President Trump's schedule that we have seen, but he is planning to send his press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, out to the briefing room for her first appearance there. Back to you.
Well, it'll be historic. Hey, Peter, going back to when you were talking about how Donald Trump revoked the Biden policy allowing trans people to serve in the armed forces. The number of trans people in the armed services right now, I know there was an NIH study or estimate done like 5 years ago at 8,000. Who knows how many there are today. What's going to happen to those people?
It sounds like once Pete Hegseth comes up with the new policy, they are going to be discharged. And it's not essentially what the argument is in the fact sheet that we were given about that executive order. President Trump does not think that transgender people are physically or mentally stable enough to serve in the armed forces, and they specifically cite readiness with transition surgeries. If you have a transition surgery, the recovery time and the narcotics that you have to be on as part of the process could affect your readiness for up to 12 months. They say that is what their concern is. So if there's a readiness concern, you're basically booted from the military.
Gotcha.
All right.
Thank you, Peter.
So I guess they were waiting for Pete to get the job, but they've certainly gotten wokeness out of the military. DEI is going to be history. They're going to enforce it. And goodbye DEI among Veterans Affairs, too. 60 DEI employees over at Veterans Affairs with salaries totaling more than $8 million. We're told they're done. There's no need. If you talk about cutting, they're cutting DEI programs everywhere, but especially in the military. And I thought Pete said something interesting on the steps yesterday, and I'm going to enforce it to make sure you're not going around me. But when it comes to the Tuskegee Airmen, they thought that was a little, that was passive-aggressive. We're going to cut that off because that's DEI. No, it isn't. It's a fantastic military story about the first black fighter pilot.
It was intentionally cut to try to cut the knees out of this administration.
Make it seem racially intolerant.
And to make Pete seem like a racist, make the president. The whole point of the Tuskegee Airmen is their merit and acknowledging their merit. I'm just glad that we finally got a Pentagon that is worried about metrics. And the metrics have to be, can you do the O course? Can you do the job? Are you lethal enough? Can you go after the enemy? Do you have the mental capacity to decipher the enemy versus friend? That's all I want. I don't care about getting women in. I don't care about getting diversity numbers in. I want to be feared by the world. And finally, we have people in there that's willing to do that.
It's all about defense.
He also signed an executive order saying if you lost your military career, and 8,000 people did because they refused to have the vaccine, then you could be reinstated, with back pay. So we interviewed Lieutenant Colonel Douglas Haig. He has served our country in the Army. He was 2 years away from retirement, and he said he resigned from the military when they were forcing him to do this. He didn't want to say, I'm going to claim an exemption, like a religious exemption, because he said that wasn't true.
Right.
So because they were kicking him out, he just said he resigned. So he's not sure he's eligible for the reinstatement, but this is what he said about Donald Trump and what he went through.
I think me, like many others, were ecstatic about it at the idea, the potential to rejoin the service. You know, I spent 18 years on active duty service. It was my career, my entire adulthood, and I, you know, I lost that, and now there's the potential to regain it now. So very appreciative. I'm thankful that President Trump made these promises early on and is now following through with them. So I didn't want to get the vaccine. I made it clear early on in my, you know, before the mandate, actually, to my leadership that I was not planning to get it. Once it was mandated, I told them I wasn't going to, and I submitted my resignation. Me personally, I love the idea of going back to the service. It's what I'm passionate about.
He was an officer. Let me just say one thing, if that's okay. This is what he did for our country. Officer in the Army, completed airborne school, Ranger school, served as an infantry officer, communications officer, 2 deployments to Iraq, 1 in Kuwait, and then rejoined as a drilling reservist when that mandate was finally dropped. So I hope he is eligible. I hope they do case-by-case basis. If you retired or you resigned because of that mandate, then hopefully you can go back and serve and get that back pay.
Right. I just like to add this before we move on from defense. The president brought it up in every speech and no one ever reported it because they were more into finding something controversial about his campaign remarks. But he says, I sign an executive order to start building the Iron Dome for this country, missile defense. Now, to keep up with the next hypersonics and everything, to make sure it's not outdated, is going to need constant improvement. But he said, I watched what was happening with Israel. I saw them knock down all those missiles coming from Iran. I've seen it happen regularly, what's happening in Ukraine. Why don't we have it in our country? So it's going to cost something like $250 billion. Congress has got to green light it, but he wants work to start right away. Who in this country would not want missile defense, especially with ICBMs being shot by North Korea? How does it make sense that we don't have a shield? Rumsfeld talked about it, and they said, you're crazy. The technology's not there. He was not crazy. He was right with the concept. But I think we're there. And I like to say, I don't know how you guard a country this big, but I'm sure there's some scientists that we could focus on putting him in areas.
Combination of that idea as well as we got to get with these drones. I mean, we got to figure out how they're able to fly, who they are.
Right.
I want technology. I want R&I into that as well. So President Trump signing 4 new military-focused executive orders, including one that calls to remove DEI in the military and another banning transgender service members. Watch.
And in a little while, I'll be signing 4 new executive orders. First is that I'm directing our new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who's going to be great, by the way. We will get transgender ideology the hell out of our military. It's going to be gone. In addition, we will stop our service members from being indoctrinated with radical left ideologies such as critical race theory.
So Medal of Honor recipient, Staff Sgt. David Bellavia joins us now. Thanks for getting up this morning, David.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
So obviously we're excited to have Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense Secretary. What do you make of these new changes, getting rid of the DEI, focused on the mission plan, which is to defeat the enemy?
Lawrence, if you know the cliche is war is hell, I can't even tell you how devastating Joe Biden and Democrats have been to the DOD, knowingly gutting our ethos, who we are, making us try to think about whether or not we're the bad guy or the good guy. We talk about this transgender ban. This isn't a transgender ban. This is clearly stating that if you cannot deploy and fight, then we don't want you in the military, which is the equivalent of saying to our pilots, if you can't see, we don't want you behind the yoke of an F-16 Charlie. We don't want you on an F-22. Transgender soldiers right now, whether you're on hormones or you're non-deployable for 36 months after a transition surgery, well, who are you fighting for? What do you do? Are you there for you or are you there for your country and your teammates? This is all about taking the selfishness out of serving your country and reminding people it's all about the community, it's all about the team, it's all about the country. And I'm ashamed that it took executive orders to remind the greatest military in the world who we are and what we do.
It's so incredible. I mean, you just laid it out perfectly about what the standards should be, and it should be no different based on what box you check. Here's Secretary Hegseth is going to take some getting used to, laying out the major plan. Watch.
Today, there are more executive orders coming that we fully support on removing DEI inside the Pentagon. Our job is lethality and readiness and warfighting. We're going to hold people accountable.
I mean, he wrote a book about it. Expect major changes.
Yeah, I mean, really, that book is the bedrock of what, I mean, if you want to know where the 29th Secretary of Defense stands, it's all in black and white. But I mean, the key, again, is that the Chinese, the Russians, or Iran, ISIS, Al-Qaeda.
That's right.
When we go to the battlefield, none of these things about a kinder, gentler world. We all want peace. No one wants war. But we will be ready to wipe you off the face of the planet if you want to hurt our citizens or our allies and our friends. That's the entire subject matter. You know, when I was in school, Lawrence, like you, what was the main line of the paragraph? It's, this is what we do in the military. We will break you and we will force you to change your opinion. That's what this is all about. And we can't do it by making ourselves feel good about who we want to be. No more of this petri dish mentality. We are a warrior class, and we have to be that to keep America safe.
I love the warrior energy. All the door kickers that I've been speaking with, men like you, they all have this reignited energy, and that started with the Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump, and Pete Hegseth leading the way. Sergeant, thanks so much for joining the program this morning.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.